Next, we'll try to understand one of the most important evolution or concepts inside Node.js, that is, which I would say very confusing concepts as well in Node.js. So, having a good grip of these uh, callbacks, promises, then catch, and async await is very important, because here the execution of programming, execution of Node.js code is totally disturbed or totally out of your mind, and you can't even say how your code is going to be executed, right? Because it is going to be dealing with the event loop and worker threads and all of the stuff like that. So first, let's try to understand from the very basics, right? So I'll pull this code out. I'll push it up so that all comments are at one place, and then I'll put the required statements on the top, right? I'll put the required statements on the top, and then our function, right? First thing, before even understanding or before even going to understand the callbacks or execution process or promises or async await, we need to know that in JavaScript, functions are first class value variables. Okay, what does this means? Okay, first thing, JavaScript is a pure functional oriented programming language, and first class variables, functions are first class variables, right? What does that mean? It means that in JavaScript, function can be assigned to a variable, it can be passed as an argument to a function. You must have never seen this happen in any programming language. You cannot pass a function as an argument to another function, right? How is that possible? Yes, it is totally possible in JavaScript, and that's what paves the way for callback function, right? So here, this is called as function definition. So here, function uh, random, okay, or sum, right? Function sum is going to be returning a comma b, sum of a plus b, right? Return a plus b, right? Now when you call this function 1 comma 2, this function is going to be executed. This is called as function definition and function invoking. So here it is called as function definition, and here it is function invoke, right? Now the same function can be written in a different way. Constant sum is equal to function a comma b return a plus b. So here what I have done is I am assigning a function to a variable. Variable can be some variable or anything, right? So both are same, but here I am assigning an anonymous function, a function without any name, to another variable, a JavaScript variable, and I am trying to invoke this function, or this is called as function expression. So this is called as function expression. Now I can call this function using the variable name and passing arguments 1 comma 2. Both are valid. So both are valid in case of JavaScript. Function expression, here we assign a anonymous function to a variable. So we are assigning a function definition to a variable, and this is why we call JavaScript as in JavaScript functions are first class variables, because they can be assigned to a variable or they can also be passed as an argument to another function, right? Now let's see, or let's understand what are callbacks, right? So let's say I want to function definition with callback. Okay, so what here it means is that, right, you do some operation a comma b, and after that call this callback. Okay, so function main. So let me pull down all the invocations to the bottom, right, and with callback and sum with callback. I'll rename it as sum with callback. Okay, now what it is going to do is c constant c is equal to a plus b, right, and then I'm passing my result inside this c. So what did I just do, right? So sum with callback is going to take three arguments. First one is number, second one is number, third one is a function. It's not an argument or it's not a value, it's a function. So how do I invoke this? Sum with callback is going to take 10 comma 20 comma and a function. So it is going to take a function, and now what am I passing to? So this, see, the function definition is being passed over here as an argument, right? And this function is going to be called once the sum has been done. So here I am going to get the sum value, right? Console.log sum, right? So when I do this, what is the execution order, right? What are you expecting? So first I define two functions, right? Let me pull all of the functions to the bottom, right, to avoid the confusion, because that's here, from here onwards confusion starts. So I have two functions, function main and function sum with callback. I'm invoking sum with callback first, and then I'm invoking the main function, right? Now when I run this code, node index.js, with this code, what will happen? So see, when I ran this code, first sum console.log 30 is printed, console.log 30 is printed. And how did it print it? Because we passed an argument to a function which is called as sum with callback, and when the sum operation is done, we are just calling this operation sum with callback, and you got the output. And then main function is called. Inside the main function, you got to see the named arguments and also the statement hello to Iron Man from the Marvel, which parts the command line arguments. But here, what is this syntax called as? This syntax is called as passing a callback. So it is nothing but function callback, right? So this callback does nothing. It just console.logs, right? Console.log sum, and who is passing or who is calling this function? This function is being called inside the sum with callback, and now the sum with callback is just going to be like this. So see, now it is nothing but we have three functions: main, sum with callback, and callback. So sum with callback is now invoked with 10 comma 20 comma callback, and that's it, right? So this is a normal callback execution order, right? Now why do we need callbacks, right? If you recollect our discussion on the architecture of Node.js, on how Node.js performs its tasks, or how do Node.js segregates the blocking and non-blocking operations. Here everything was non-blocking, hence the flow of execution is synchronous. So when in Node.js, when the code being executed is non-blocking, then it follows synchronous execution. It means one after another, right? Now, how do we create a blocking code, right? How do we create a blocking code? Let's understand that part. For that, first we'll understand the different timer functions, that is set timeout, set interval, and set immediate. First, these two are more than enough, right? So what is set timeout, right? Set timeout is a asynchronous function which takes two arguments, that is number of milliseconds, two arguments. First, let's list down this. Arg1 is a callback function, and arg2 number of milliseconds. So what set timeout does is it schedules to call a function after certain or after mentioned time delay, right? Now your entire code is going to be disturbed. See, now what I am going to do is I am going to define set timeout. Okay, set timeout is a function. Here I am going to assign a callback function, right? A callback function, and first argument is a callback function, and second argument is the number of milliseconds for which it has to wait. Now what I am saying by Node.js is that schedule a function after 1 second, right? So now when I do console.log hello, now what I am doing, I first passed an argument which is a callback function. It means I am registering a callback function, and then I'm letting my Node.js know that call this function after 1 second, right? 1000 milliseconds is nothing but 1 second. Hello inside set timeout, right? Now when I execute this code, see, after 1 second this code is called. After 1 second this code is called. This is because Node.js, though the code has been written on the top of the program, it is executed only after 1 second. So if I put it anywhere in my code and run this, the same thing is going to happen, right? This is because set timeout is an asynchronous function which takes two arguments and it schedules to call a function after mentioned time delay. So this is the time delay. Now what is the set interval is going to do? Set interval is going to do the same thing, but this is going to call the function. This is going to call the function with regular time interval gaps, that is 1 second, 1 second, 1 second, right? Set interval. Now if you see this, hello inside set timeout, inside set interval. So this set interval is like a timer which prints after every 1 second. So if I just put like this, console.log new date dot toString, right? Then I can see my time. It's like a clock now. 11, 12, 13. It's going to be called after every 1 second and it is printing the time. So set timeout and set interval are not blocking my main thread, right? So see, if I call main function again at the bottom, then what will happen? See, hello Marvel. So this function is again called twice. Hello to Iron Man from Marvel, hello to Iron Man from Marvel, and set interval function is executed and set timeout function is also executed. So set interval and set timeout are asynchronous functions which schedules. So what is happening here, right? So whenever Node.js sees such type of functions, it pushes them to event queue or callback queue. So set timeout or set interval are dealt specially. It means they are going to be registered in a callback queue, and removing that from callback queue. So every 1 second, what happens is one function. So whenever Node.js sees this part of code, this function is placed in a callback queue, and by setting a timer, and after 1 second, the event loop it continuously rotates, right? So when the main stack is empty, so if you see here, let me explain it. So when the main thread is executing, the event loop first sees two functions in the execution, some with callback and main. Once this function is returned and this function is returned, event loop goes and checks for the timers and checks, okay, if there are any timeouts and are the timer running and is it out, I mean timer is completed or not. Then Node.js event loop plugs this function, it pulls out this function and places in the main execution queue. Again, that's why we are seeing the console.logs after 1 second. And the set interval, what this function does is it creates every one function, it automatically generates every one function after 1 second, and event loop continuously pushes to that queue again and again, right? So this is what, and here in set timeout, the delay which you are giving is the minimum time for which the Node.js is going to wait. So this timed delay is not the exact timed delay which Node.js is going to wait. It is the minimum time. It means definitely the Node.js is going to wait for 1 second, but sometimes it may also go for 2 seconds or 3 seconds, because if there are hundreds of code which are scheduled for 1 second, then what will Node.js do? Like, let's say this function is going to take some time for execution, right? Then what it is going to do, right? So in that cases, hence Node.js terms that I am not saying I'll be waiting for 1 second exactly, but instead I will wait minimum of 1 second or whatever time delay what you are providing. Right? That's one of the important thing which you need to understand. Now, how do you identify or how do you make use of the Node.js calling asynchronous execution? It means Node.js can register some functions and we can call it at a later point of time. Because see, with this way of execution, right? With this way of execution, the main advantage is that your main thread is not blocked. It means your main thread is going to do the work when there are no functions available, right? Callback 30 and 20. So see, my main thread is doing the work. It did the work 30, 40, though it is registering the asynchronous callbacks, right? Now let's leverage this concept to understand how you can use the callbacks functions in JavaScript or Node.js, right? So let me pull out this. Yes. Now let me define few other functions, right? Function time taking operation, and this is some operation which is going to take some time. Let's say it's a DB operation, it's a network operation, and something else, right? And function time taking but dependent on first function, right? So this is time taking but it's dependent on the first function. Now there is a function which is main, so let me use up this same main, right? Let me use up the same main, and this is the main one who is calling the functions, right? Now main function has to call task1, or I can rename it as task1, and this I can rename it as task2, and now I can write it here. Task1 comma task2 are time taking, and task2 is dependent on task 1, right? So this is the task. Now my main thread should not be blocked. Always write a Node.js code where you are not blocking your main thread, right? Now how can you achieve this, right? So if you call like this, task 1 and task 2, right, what will happen? Let's see. First let's define the function bodies of this. So since it is a time taking process, I'll wantedly put some set timeout. So this function is going to be executed after 2 seconds, or let me use this. This function is going to return its output after 2 seconds. So if I say a plus b, a comma b, and it is multiplying, return a star b, right? So return a star b, and if I expect constant result is equal to a star b, and I'm passing that to the second function, right? And this function is going to do just nothing. It console.log and it prints 2000. Again, it takes 2000 milliseconds to console.log this result, right? Now after this, I'll just do console.log start end. This is going to be end, and this is going to be console.log start, right? So 10 comma 20. Now when I run this main code, let's see what is the output, right? So if I run this main code, node index.js, see, first it throws an error. Let's see. Okay, I made a spelling mistake. That's totally fine. We are humans, we are allowed to do spelling mistakes. Oh my god. So see, everything is undefined now. So first thing, start got printed. Task 1 is asynchronous, so it didn't wait. So for the task 1, we are not waiting because it's an asynchronous function. Node.js automatically identified it and it put it in the event queue, and task 2 is also Node.js asynchronous function, so it is also put in the event queue, and immediately the main thread reached the end. So start and end instead of printing any of these. So if you see here, even if I do console.log a comma b, and over here if I see start and end, then after 2 seconds a comma b has been executed, and after this result here, the whatever result we are passing, this is not available to the main thread, so it has undefined. It has created itself as undefined because when main thread reached this point, result is undefined. So this is how you are not blocking your main thread, but you are giving control to some worker threads. But when you are giving control to your worker threads, you need to give them a callback function, or you need to do some kind of mapping in respect to them. That's why this is going to be tricky when you are dealing with asynchronous functions using callbacks. Now, how can I handle this situation, right? Now I can handle this situation either by doing this, that task 2, either by doing this, task 2 is passed as a callback function. Task 2 is called as a callback function, right? And now once my execution is done, and also this return statement, this is not the return statement of the outer function, But this return statement is the return statement for this inner function who don't know who defined it and where it is going to return, because this is an anonymous function which has put in the queue by Node.js. So this is returning to some value which nobody is caring about. So this return statement and the return statement outside are different. Okay. So now once my execution is done, what I'll do is I'll call the task2 function with my output. Now this code is totally a Node.js code. So I'm supplying task1. Since task1 and task2 are dependent tasks here, task1 and task2 are dependent tasks, I have given task2 as an callback function, and once the task1 is completed, maybe after 2 seconds, task2 will be invoked, and which will be completed after what do I say, task2 will be invoked after 2 seconds. So overall gap is 2 seconds, 4 seconds, right? Now what if you want to get this result in the main function, how do you gonna do that? See, task1 is executed, and then after 4 seconds, the task2 output is printed, that is console.log result. So if I do console.log a comma b, right, and execute the code, so start and end, after 2 seconds the arguments are printed, and after other 2 seconds 10 into 2 is 200, right? So this is called as perfectly non-blocking code. I am not blocking any of my Node.js code, because see here I can execute other functions or loops. Function data, this is going to be just looping over data 0. I'll let where I equal to 0, I less than 100, 1000, I plus plus, and console.log I. So though task1 has reached its execution point, my main thread is not blocked and it is ready to accept more work. So see, it is ready to accept more work. It has completed the more work, and now when the work in the main thread is completed, the event loop picks up the task1 and puts it in the execution, and task2 is scheduled again and task2 is executed. So this is how the things happen in callback, right? But what if I have another function? What if I have another function which needs to be executed, right? So now console.log is resulting over here, but maybe I have to send response to the user, or maybe I have to do other operations after task2, right? We will have a chain of operations. Then how do you are going to tackle that particular situation, or how do you are getting a result inside the main function again? So if you ask me, in the callback pattern, which is a pretty old pattern, you cannot do that. So your final line of execution, once the main thread reaches and completes the function execution, you cannot get back to that point again in Node.js. So if you want to do any task after task2, you will pass it as a callback function to task2 again. So that is what called as callback hell. So callback hell is nothing but when one task is dependent on another task, you just have to keep on passing task 2 and task 3 and something of that sort. Task 3, task 4, task 4. So that is called as callback hell. That is passing the callbacks again and again repeatedly to one or the other function, right? So is there any way, because see now task 2, let's define more task. Now whatever the number is present here, now task 3, I'll define task 3, which is a pretty normal function. Whatever result you are going to give, it is just going to return result by 10, and there is task 4. Task 2 is console.logging, and task 4 is again final result, which is console.logging, and the same way as this, right? Now what is going to happen? The main function will only invoke task 1 Now task 2 has to identify this use case, and it has to take a callback function as a pattern, and when you're calling task 2, you need to give task 3 as an input, right? And task 3 will be called over here, but task 4 is dependent on task 3, right? This is what called as callback hell. I'll show you. Task 3 is passed with the result, and once task 3 execution is done, you have to call task 4. So once task 2 execution is done, you are calling task 3, and once task 3 constant final result is equal to this, and you are calling task 4 now, task 4 with this final result, right? And you must have already lost somewhere, but what are we doing? What this final result? What is task 3, task 4? So when you have such a dependent task on your name, so this is what happens, right? I don't have the main function, data function defined. Start end. Now see 10, 20, 200, then 20, right? So 200. So what is happened here? So first let's put down the identifiers. Task 1, and inside task 2 I am calling task 3, and task 3 is taking task, this is not necessary, I am calling task 3, task 3 is calling task 4, right? So callback, 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 right? So this is what the hell of callback is, or you have to chain these functions multiple times, right? So there is a way to avoid this callback hell, right? There is a way to avoid this callback hell. So basically callback hell would look something like this. If I haven't refined all of these functions with the name, then I would have done this function, this, and task 2 is nothing but this, right? So now I'll have the result. So after completing yes, after completing my task first operation, I have to call the callback function, that is task 2. I called it with the callback function, right? Now after task 2, let me just correct it down. Task 2, I have to call the task 3. So I have to assign this function over here, right? This function over here, and then I have to, after task 2 is done, task 3 is called, right? Task 3 is called, and after that task 4 needs to be executed. Task 4 needs to be executed, and you no longer need task 2. So this is what callback hell is, right? So yeah, now when you run this code, start and 10 task 1, difference error, task 3 is not defined, task 3 is not defined. Where am I accessing task 3? It is on the line number 83. Yes. So first callback, right? So after first callback, which is here, callback, I'll call it as callback, right? So after that, again, I'm passing another callback function, right? I'm passing another callback function, and inside that callback function, which is this, it is dividing the task and executing it. So now when you see start and end, and task 1 20, and result is not defined, which is at the line 83. We will fix it. Yes, this is no longer needed for us. Or I have to take the result as an argument, right? And then I have to console.log result. So my first function is task1, it got executed, and I am passing a callback function, and that callback function is calling another callback function, and that callback function is calling another callback function. Now when I execute this, I should be able to see all the tasks. I have to put it down. So this is task2 callback function, right? So task3 and task4, right? So these are the different ways a callback function is invoked, right? And usually it looks like this, and it is totally messed up when you do with callbacks, and that's the reason Node.js has introduced a new way of execution. So basically it looks like this: one, then inside one function you have another function, and inside function callback, and here again you will provide another callback. This is going to say some c comma d, and again here going to define another function, right? So that's how callback 1, callback 2, callback 3, callback, and that's how the code is going to be executed in callbacks, right? Next, we'll look at how you can solve or how you can get out of this callbacks with the help of promises, right?